Some video games are remembered because they were just perfect, like Mortal Kombat games. Fighting Force, however, was never perfect. That's part of why people still remember it. It was released in 1997 by Core Design, the same studio behind Tomb Raider. It took the classic beat-em-up idea and pushed it into early 3D. You picked one of these four characters, walked through streets, subway stations, buildings, other dangerous places as you went, picked up whatever you could find, beat the living hell out of anyone standing in your way. It was pretty loud, it was simple, messy, very much a product of the PlayStation era, but there was a great game, in fact, hiding inside those old polygons. So first of all, here's the thing. There is no official full remake of Fighting Force right now in development. The series did recently return in the Fighting Force collection, which brought the first two games to modern platforms with things like improved resolution, save states, rewind, and some other useful features as well. But that is a preservation release rather than the full remake many would probably want today. And after seeing how much potential the original actually had, a proper remake could be something really special. The first thing I personally want to see is that same feeling when you walk into a street, realize you're about to cause complete chaos. You know, the original game didn't need a complicated reason to make you fight. You simply moved forwards, enemies appeared, and the fun began. A modern remake could keep that simple idea while making the city feel much more bigger, more alive around you. Imagine starting in a dark city street late at night, with rain covering the pavement and police lights flashing somewhere in the distance. Cars sit damaged along the road while a few stores are still open. There's signs lighting up the sidewalk. You can hear traffic, people shouting, distant sirens and stuff before the first group of enemies actually walk towards you. One of them then picks up a pipe, another grabs a trash can, and your character simply cracks the knuckles and gets ready. Then the fighting starts. That's the kind of opening Fighting Force deserves, at least. The combat should remain easy to understand because that was always the appeal. Punch, kick, grab, throw, dodge, and use whatever just basically happens to be nearby. A modern remake doesn't need a giant skill tree or 100 different attack moves. It just needs punches that feel heavy, throws that feel satisfying, enemies that react properly when they get hit. The environment, of course, could make the fights much more fun than they were in the original. The core design, of course, already allowed players to use objects like chairs, trash cans, or tires, knives, and weapons. A remake could finally show what that idea was capable of with modern physics. Break a wooden chair over someone's back, throw a parking sign across the street, smash an enemy into a car and watch the alarm go off, pick up a traffic cone because apparently that's just what you had available then. The city could become one giant playground for that kind of fighting. A restaurant becomes a battlefield for 5 minutes before you destroy half the tables. A subway platform turns into a desperate fight while trains continue passing behind you. A shopping mall, gives you escalators, store signs, glass windows, benches, and all kinds of objects to use. And an underground parking garage gives you cars, pillars, ramps, narrow spaces that completely change the way you fight. That variety would keep the game moving without needing a huge open world. The four main characters, of course, should also return because they were just a big part of what made the original work. Each one of those characters had different strengths and weaknesses, so choosing who to play actually changes the way the game felt. A remake could keep that basic idea while giving every character a much more bigger personality. One fighter could be the slow powerhouse who hits harder than everyone else. Another could be fast and aggressive with weaker attacks but better movement. Another could focus on weapons and distance. The best part, however, would be seeing how those differences work in two-player co-op. That's where Fighting Force could really come alive again. Two friends walking through a city together, grabbing random objects and throwing them at enemies sounds simple, but that's exactly the kind of multiplayer experience people remember. One of you throws an enemy across the screen, while the other one catches him with a flying kick. Someone picks up a trash can and accidentally hits their own friend. Both players start fighting over the same weapon. Suddenly the entire screen becomes chaos. That kind of fun doesn't need to be designed into every second, it just basically happens. The bosses should also be memorable, not just giant health bars with some stronger attacks per se. Like a boss should have a personality and a fighting style that makes you remember them later. One might use heavy weapons and destroy parts of the environment during the fight, another could be just extremely fast and just force you to keep moving. A larger enemy might grab cars and throw them across the street. On the other hand, in fact, the arena itself should become part of the battle. Like imagine fighting a giant boss inside a subway station while trains continue arriving. You have to watch the tracks while avoiding attacks, and at some point then the boss gets knocked on the platform just as a train comes rushing through. That's a kind of ridiculous action a modern fighting force could actually deliver. And of course, well, obviously, visually, the remake shouldn't try to hide its roots. The original was one of the early 3D games where the technology itself was part of the charm. A modern version can keep comic book look while finally giving the characters proper faces, better animations, detailed clothing, and believable environments. And yeah, the city should feel dirty and dangerous without becoming overly realistic. Wet streets, bright signs, old buildings, broken windows, factories, subway tunnels, everything should feel like one big urban playground. This is probably the easiest way to make a remake feel completely different from the original. Let players just break things. Not everything, of course, but enough that the environment reacts to the fight. Windows shatter, tables break, signs fall down, cars become damaged, stores' interiors slowly get destroyed during longer battles, and by the end of a fight, the street should look like something actually happened there. That would give every encounter its own little story. In fact, the biggest mistake would be making Fighting Force too serious now. This isn't supposed to become a realistic crime sim because the original had a certain arcade spirit that made everything feel exaggerated. Characters could take on groups of enemies, objects could become weapons, and the entire game existed to give you an excuse to keep moving forward and punching things. Keep that, make it modern, but don't make things boring. That's really the opportunity here. Fighting Force already had the basic ingredient for a great modern beat-em up. 4 characters, co-op, weapons, destructible objects, different locations, and simple combats were all actually there from the beginning. What the original didn't have was the technology to make all those ideas feel as big as they deserved. And a remake could finally do that. It could take the game people remember from the late 90s and turn it into the kind of co-op that is almost impossible to stop playing once you start. You walk into the city, you find a gang, you pick up a chair, someone throws a bottle, you front kicks a guy through a window, a car alarm starts screaming, the police arrives, and now you're fighting everybody. Somehow that's exactly where you wanted the game to actually go. That's the spirit Fighting Force should keep. Not complicated, not overly serious, just 4 characters, a city full of trouble, and a ridiculous amount of stuff waiting to be punched, thrown, smashed, or accidentally get destroyed. And sometimes that's all you need for a great night with a friend.